We welcome Professor Twali to give his welcome remarks. Karibu, Prof.
Thank you, Florence, for that very effusive introduction. And thank you to my fellow panelists who have agreed to come and have a conversation around this very important topic on the mental health of university students in Kenya. And I also just want to thank and welcome all the participants who are joining us for this webinar. I hope it's going to be informative, and I hope it will also be engaging, and we will get a lot of engagement from those that are participating. This study was carried out across several universities, both in Nairobi and in Eldoret, and recruited a large number of students, as you're going to hear from us. And, we intend to track them, or track some of them throughout their university education, so that we can start understanding what mental health issues at the beginning and during the university period affect the lives of the students, both their personal lives, social lives, and their academic life as well. So just to welcome all of you, and back to you, Florence.
Thank you so much. Prof was the lead from the project. Also with us here today is Dr. Caroline Ayuya from Daystar. She's a clinical psychologist and director research, innovation, commercialization, and entrepreneurship from that institution. She's a clinical psychologist, senior lecturer, researcher, and higher education leader based at that institution, Daystar. She serves as director of research, innovation, commercialization, and entrepreneurship, where she leads institutional strategy in research excellence, innovation ecosystems, commercialization, intellectual property, artificial intelligence, entrepreneurship, and global partnerships. She has over a decade of university teaching and more than 15 years of clinical practice, and her work sits at the intersection of mental health, research leadership, digital transformation, and institutional development. She's the founding leader of Daystar's eCampus Growth and has played a central role in expanding postgraduate education, doctoral supervision, online learning, and research capacity across the university. Her research interests span child and adolescent psychopathology, anxiety and mood disorders, addiction, trauma, psychometrics, digital mental health, and evidence synthesis. She has contributed to major international mental health studies involving over 70,000 university students across 18 countries and has published in globally recognized peer-reviewed outlets. Dr. Mwaka is also a grant leader and innovation strategist with experience mobilizing partnerships and funded projects across Africa, Europe, and the US. He's passionate about building African universities that generate knowledge, transform communities, commercialize innovation, and shape global conversations on mental health research and inclusive development. Definitely an exciting addition to this discussion. Here with us also is Vivian Kwega, a student from University of Nairobi, who is passionate about law, and she's a public speaker with a strong commitment to human rights, gender equality, and youth empowerment. She's currently pursuing her master's in law at University of Nairobi and is actively engaged in advocacy, research, and writing, and leadership in and out of campus. She currently serves as an associate editor of the University of Nairobi Law Journal, where she contributes to advancing legal scholarship and academic discourse on contemporary legal issues. Recently, during the 25th session of the Kenya Model United Nations, she was honored to be crowned Best Commissioner of the International Law Commission, distinguishing herself through exceptional legal analysis and diplomacy. She was also recognized as a two-time Best Draft Article winner for her research papers on sea level rise in relation to international law and immunity of state officials from foreign criminal jurisdiction. Additionally, she was awarded two-time Best Oralist, demonstrating excellence in legal argument and public speaking. Her advocacy and speaking journey extends beyond KMUN, and she has been recognized as Best Speaker during Refugee Week 2025 and InterVarsity Debate Finalist, and a Best Speaker in multiple public speaking forums, reflecting her continued commitment to using her voice as a tool for justice and impact. As a founder and director of Scouts for Gender-Based Violence and Mental Health Awareness Initiative, she has led a youth-driven platform committed to breaking silence around gender-based violence and mental health. Within 1 year, the initiative has expanded its reach to 8 countries, impacting over 3,000 individuals, and continues to grow influence and community engagement. Driven by a belief in purpose and impact, she works at the intersection of law, advocacy, diplomacy, and social development, building a future where rights are respected, voices are heard, and action leads to transformation. She's especially drawn to international law and diplomacy, and she seeks to contribute to global legal frameworks that promote justice, peace, and human dignity across borders. Vivian will be here to share some of her perspectives about mental health, from the perspective of a university student. So we'll dive right into the presentation, starting with Professor Lukoe. If you have any questions or any ideas and thoughts, please jot them down either on your notebooks or in the chat section, and we'll address them when we come to the panel discussion. So karibu, Prof. Lukoe.
Thank you very much. Just going to share my slides very quickly. Thank you very much, Florence, for the kind introduction again, and thank you to all the participants who have come. So we are going to share today some of the evidence from the UZIMA data science study, which had a component that was looking at the mental health of our university students. And we had a rationale for this where we figured that university years coincide with a high-risk developmental stage when most mental disorders emerge. In fact, more than 75% of mental disorders will manifest before the age of 25, which is the period when most of these young people are at the university. It also involves multiple pressures, which are many times triggers, like the transition from high school, problems with finances, managing academic pressure, and so on. And then mental health affects academic performance, affects engagement, affects how the students interact with each other, and contributes to the various student trajectories. And we know that we have very limited human resources for health, especially in mental health. And so we need to understand if we are able to predict students who will struggle because of mental health challenges, then we can easily focus on them right from the beginning instead of waiting for these things to explode. And so what we did is that we set out to develop a cohort of university students in the country in order to understand their mental health trajectory as they transition through the university. And beginning last year, we recruited first-year students with the intention of tracking them through the university period using the World Mental Health International College Student Survey tool to assess a wide range of mental disorders that we're going to look at. Besides the quantitative assessment, we also selected about 90 of the students who had, a positive score on the tool. So they had at least one diagnosis, and we did qualitative interviews to understand their help-seeking behaviors and the challenges that they are facing in accessing care. So we have a cohort of 4,572 first-year students from University of Nairobi, the Aga Khan University, Kenyatta University, Moi University, and Daystar universities, who are a mix of public and private universities. And we have also the 90 that who reported a history of mental disorder. So what did we find? Very briefly, I will take you through the findings. So this is the complexion of the students that we recruited into the study. The majority were male, 57%, and about 2/3 were either 19 or 20 years old. 71% reported being heterosexual. Almost 50% are in a rural setting, and a quarter of them live at home. while 58% live within the university hostels or compound. And an interesting socio-demographic factor that is of importance, as we are going to see, was the frequency of religious activities, where we find that more than 90% of them engage in religious activities at least a few times a month, but many of them also doing so more than twice in a week. And so these are the disorders we found. So we categorize these disorders into lifetime, 12 months, and 30 days, as you can see. Sorry. Let me just get that. Yeah, so the important finding here for lifetime. Lifetime means at any point in their life, they have met criteria for at least one mental disorder. So for any disorder, lifetime, almost a half of the students, 49.7%, met criteria for at least one mental disorder in their lifetime. 45% met this criteria in the past 12 months at the time of the interview, while 31% met the criteria within the past month at the time of the interview. So this is a pretty high prevalence in this population. Some of the most common diagnoses that we found were any eating disorder. So if you look at eating disorders, which is a finding that is new compared to other previous studies that we have done in this population, 29% reported lifetime eating disorder, and this continued in the past 1 year. A quarter of them continued to have that diagnosis, and in the past month, 17.6%. And these eating disorders consisted of binge eating, about a quarter of the students reporting having this, purging type, 13%, and 8.7% having bulimia, and corresponding high prevalences across 1 year and 1 month. Other disorders which were pretty prevalent included social anxiety, as you can see, almost a quarter at lifetime, and going down to about 16.6% in the past month. Post-traumatic stress disorder, 15%, lifetime going down to up to 6.8% past month symptomatology. Substance use, 10%, but past month going down to 4%. And then we had generalized anxiety disorder, also relatively high, from 8.5% lifetime to 5.4% 30-day. Conditions like major depressive disorder, 3.2%, so stable between 2 and 3% across a lifetime. So that's how they look like, and if you're looking at it in a graphical manner, that is how they were distributed. Any disorder, almost 50%. Any eating disorder relatively high, and they're categorized here: binge eating, purging, and bulimia. And then social anxiety disorder, PTSD, substance use, and generalized anxiety disorder. We also looked at some of the factors associated with any of these disorders. So so we picked the general category of any disorder, which, remember, 49.7% of the students met that criteria, and we looked at the factors associated with this. At multivariable level, that's where we have controlled for all the other variables. You find that males have 40% reduced odds of meeting a criteria for any of the mental disorders compared to the females. And the other significant finding is engaging in religious activities at least a few times a month, as you can see, reduces the risk of meeting criteria for mental disorder. And it looks like it's dose dependent. The more times one is engaged, the lower the odds of having a mental disorder, up to less than, reducing it by up to 54%. Now, this we looked at 12-month. The first one was lifetime. Now, this is at 12 months. Again, the same factors continue to remain significant, with males having 37% reduced odds for meeting a criteria, while religious engagement, again, had a dose-dependent reduction in odds of mental disorder. The same obtains if you look at it in the past 1 month. Being male reduced the odds by 41%, and again, any religious engagement reduced it in a dose-dependent manner, as you can see. When we did the qualitative assessment, these are some of the things the students said. The issues about keeping to themselves, being lonely, and not wanting to engage with other people were some of the things that they reported experiencing emotionally. And there were also physical symptoms, headache, stomach aches, and so on, associated with the symptoms of a mental disorder. Many of them were aware of the problem and were willing to seek help. But some of them indicated they had just learned to live with it, and they were just going along, not necessarily seeking help. Some of the coping mechanisms, some of them were seeking social support, as you can see, and some would go for professional care at the institutions. And finally, some of the barriers to seeking help that the students reported included negative experience with care. So they went for care, but they had a very negative experience, like feeling judged, or they did not feel like they got the help that they needed, or that their parents, were not supportive, fear of stigma, perceived breach of confidentiality, especially in health sciences settings. And also the cost of care was considered to be pretty high. And some of the causes that they attributed to the emotional distress included problems with the family, childhood traumas, bullying, especially in high school, and then challenges with the self-image. Some of them had experienced severe adversities, including loss of loved ones, and this seemed to have triggered the onset of these disorders. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end after the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for those interesting findings. We'll dive into them at the discussion. Next, I welcome Prof. Ayuya to share her presentation.
All right, Doc, thank you so much. Thank you, Prof, and our senior and a great mentor in this area. I don't know if Doc Jaguga, should I share, or it is shared on that side?
Please go ahead and share.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Prof, Doc, and the panelists for this particular session. I think we've had that data, and as Prof has indicated, very alarming data that really needs us to, as partakers of mental health practitioners in the country and our regions and perspectives of Africa, to undertake a serious consideration on why this data matters. This data is so important for us because, mental health is central to our learning and retaining students in their studies, and of course the safety of our students in our colleges. You've heard Prof indicate certain areas of outcomes of various data in various areas of undertaking, meaning that if we do not take this evidence seriously, then we are going to have challenges. And why this evidence matters because of the academic pressure. Everybody wants a degree, everybody wants a diploma. And of course, examinations, workload, anxiety, all of these contribute to why students we are getting the data that Prof has just indicated. Of course, there's also social transitions, identity, which comes in social media, showcasing yourself, relationships, loneliness, and all these affect students in one way or this matter. And now you should read a lot of work that Dr. Florence Jaguga has done on substance, abuse and use in colleges and universities and among youth. This will give you a reason why you think this data is so key for all of us. And I know here we have students and we have faculty and we have practitioners and many others. This data matters to us, very important, because if we do not, this data is not taken seriously, then we are going to have a country that has no resources in different way. Because you see, without students, without us graduating, without academic transitions, then you can see we are going to have a gap in almost every part of the country as a nation in Africa, because these students are not just drawn from Kenya. There are those who are studying in Kenya also coming from different universities. So basically that, and probably moving the next slide, is that what is it now for us in this data? For us as UZIMA data study, we are saying that this is important for us so that we are now measuring what Prof has presented in the various categories of some of the disorders or mental health challenges that students are experiencing in terms of their symptoms, how their stresses, the coping, and of course the indicators of this particular student. And of course this data is also helping us to identify the risk. Remember, we are starting all the way from their first year. So we are able to identify the risk and the protective, cluster that we have. By the way, those who've gone through this data are also receiving support system with us free of charge. That means, we are able to support in terms of protection. But more important is we interpret what is the link between the data that Prof has given in terms of the outcomes of mental challenges that students go through vis-a-vis their outcome in academics and behavior. As I said, we're supposed to graduate, we're supposed to retain, we're also supposed to give safety to students. What does that mean? And finally, in this area of why this data matters is for us to be able to act in terms of prevention, in terms of referral pathways, and campus policy, and probably one of these days, who knows, we shall come up with a campus of mental support system where Pure is a campus where everybody goes to get a support system vis-a-vis alongside that. And so from this, then what are we looking toward as we give you this information and the data? Our next step is a campus mental health response system that is going to be proactive, compassionate, and data informed. Data does not lie. It is always informing. So we want to normalize students seeking support. We want to normalize faculty watching and seeing how come a student has changed behavior, why not finishing the assignments, what is happening. So we are trying to create this awareness. And of course, bring various counseling health teams across these universities to support our students and continuously do our research around this area so that we reduce the mental health challenges, disorders, and anything that has to do with mental health students around the universities. All of us want to have a mental health student, which will be a mental health nation, and we want you to graduate as students and flourish. That's all we want. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for that.
So if you have any question, we can engage during the.
Okay. Thank you for emphasizing the fact that the evidence that we collect is supposed to translate into action and into interventions that can actually improve the mental health of our students. Next up is Valentine. Give us the perspective of a student on campus. Karibu.
Thank you so much, Dr. Florence. So my name is Valentine Krega, and to just clarify it before continuing, I'm a second year law student at the University of Nairobi Faculty of Law and a mental health champion and enthusiast. And I have listened to Professor Lukoya's and Dr. Caroline's presentations, and they're actually true on the experiences, on the findings. That is actually true. But today I want to move past what we talk about, but the statistics, the percentages, and the records. Because when we are talking about mental health, we tend to look at the statistics, we tend to look at the percentages. But today I want to bring to us to understand what does it really mean to be a student trying to navigate academic life, trying to navigate campus life, but having or facing mental health challenges. Imagine waking up every day, you have deadlines, you have to meet your targets, you have expectations, and you have responsibilities. That is the life of a student. And I will speak for myself, and I will speak for maybe the close people that I have associated with and what I see them go through. Now, we are not forced, but we attend lectures, we attend the physical activities that are in campus without showing what we actually go through. And this should tell us something. Mental health is not just about the physical appearance of an individual, how they will come, how they will associate with people, but mental health will extend now to the emotional person of an individual. And as students at campus, we go through a lot of mental health challenges. It will not be realizable because at campus, the lecturers, the administration will focus on, the administration and the lecturers will focus more on the visible part of it. They will focus on the attendance. Is your attendance complete? Have you showed up for class? Have you finished your assignment? Have you reported on what you're supposed to report? That is what will happen at the university level. But trying to look at it from now the angle of really what students go through at campus that leads to mental health issues, it is really a lot. And I'm going to highlight some of the major things that I consider some mental health triggers. And this is as has happened to me and some people who I have witnessed the same, who have experienced the same. One of the major leading affecter of mental health is the academic pressure that comes with the campus life. You're supposed to meet expectations. You have deadlines. The lecturers are going to expect you to show up for class and attend all lectures, the strict timetables. You can find, for instance, there was a time that back in first year we had to attend a lecture back to back from 8 to 11, 11 to 2, 2 to 5. All this, the fatigue that comes with it can cause a lot of, overthinking as a student. You rethink your career path, you ask yourself questions, will you really do this? And it comes with a lot of triggers on the mental health. And apart from academics, okay, can you, I don't know if Dr. Florence, you can hear me. I can see people saying they can't hear me. Am I audible, Dr. Florence? Okay, thank you. I will proceed from there. So I was outlining some of the major affectors of mental health for students at campus. One of them, as I have said, it is the academic pressure. You're expected to show up, you're expected to perform, because what really matters, and this is something that we know as students and even the lecturers know, what really matters is the physical or the visible aspect of it. A lecturer will not stop you at campus and try to engage you at an emotional level. So it is now up to the student to try and figure things out at the emotional level so that physically they can show up and physically they can give their best. Another thing is the societal expectations. When I came to Nairobi from the village where I came from, the people there, obviously, they're saying so-and-so's child went to the University of Nairobi. Let us see what they will come back home with. So as I navigate through campus, I am having the thoughts of I should do this and this so that my family does not go through the shame of being talked about by the society. So society is setting a very high standard for students who are at campus, and this makes some of them to become numb. When you put a lot of pressure on someone, they will start focusing on how to now satisfy the societal expectations and less on how to now navigate their own mental health and navigate their own expectations. Another thing is financial stress. It can get to a point where as a student you are very low financially, and this can force you to now start looking for other resorts. You start looking for work, you start looking for a hustle, and you realize that when you're hustling, or rather when you're working and you're still a student, it can really affect your mental health. Why? Because you'll be expected to act in a certain way so that you can meet your responsibilities at the work environment. And also, at the same time, you're supposed to now satisfy your academic validation, or you're supposed to now act to your best academically. And this can be so hard because as a student, you'll be trying to balance. You'll be trying to balance between now the work life and academics, and it can be really fatigue. It can really cause a lot of fatigue on a student's end. And the last thing that I consider to be a major affecter of mental health for campus students is now the relationship issues and family issues, that I will classify them just as relationship issues. A lot of campus students are going through relationship issues that they do not come out to talk to. And you will find that the moment we do not come out to speak about what I'm going through, for example, with my family, as we are in this webinar, you can you can see my face actually, and you will just assume that Valentine is okay. Valentine is not going through anything, because I have now suppressed my emotional side, and I want now the world to see my physical side, because we are in a generation where we are told that, oh, the life must go on, time waits for no one. So when I am showing up, I will not show you how I am feeling emotionally. I will not talk to you about my family. I will not talk to you about what my friends have done to me, but I will rather just show you my physical side. And that is what most campus students are going through. They do not talk about their relationship. They do not talk about their girlfriend, boyfriend relationships. They will not talk to you about their family relationships. And then when something happens, we will start asking ourselves, what was really going on in so and so's life that led to them committing, or rather doing something that is so harmful to them? So many students, we do not come out to speak about it. And as Dr. Caroline had mentioned earlier, you see, we are seeking to create institutions that provide mental health care to students, so that we, when something happens, at least we can say we tried. But now many students do not come out, or rather many of us do not come out to speak about what happens to us. Why? Because we are fearing we have the fear of judgment, the fear of being dismissed, or the fear of being told, we went through that same thing. Why can't you also go through it, and go through it in a strong way? I want us to understand that, and I want to speak as a student. We have an agency, actually. We have different generations, and right now we have, I will not put names on them, but we have the older generation, we have us, and we have the younger generation. And when sometimes I, as a student, want to seek help and think of going or approaching someone in a generation that I am not in, I have that fear of being dismissed, the fear of being told, during when we were growing up, we were strong, we were not given this, or you are just soft, and all that. So those are some of the fears that we as campus students face, that make us not to be able to come out and speak about what is affecting us mentally. And now, with all this, we are forced to cope quietly. And when we are coping quietly, it's a way of normalizing burnout. We are not talking about it, we are not expressing ourselves, and therefore we are going to have a lot of emotional, we are going through it emotionally, and we are not coming out to speak about it. So there is a lot of emotional burnout. And as I had mentioned, while institutions will look at just the visible part, institutions will look at the attendance. They will look at, we had an activity, person X had showed up for the activity, and they now ignore the mental or the emotional aspects of all this, which is so alarming, and which causes a lot of mental health issues for students, because students do not see where they can get help at the institutional level. And as Professor Lukoya had mentioned in his presentation, we have the emotional now stresses such as loneliness, exhaustion, identity crisis. Now students are forced to battle this, and at the same time they're forced to show up for their academics, they're forced to show up physically, because we are normalizing the fact that we do not want to be asked, what are you going through? Or we just get tired of explaining to maybe a person who will not understand. And now this is the point where institutions and people who are champions for mental health come in. And from lived experience, I can tell us for a fact that mental health is not just a personal problem. Mental health is a collective responsibility, because students in campus are trying to excel, students are trying to balance, and students are trying to meet expectations. And now the question comes in as not as what can we do to help these students, but what can we do to ensure that students are seen, students are heard, and students are helped? Because if we ask ourselves, what can we do? We will accept that you're going to establish mental health centers, you're going to ensure that campuses have counselors and all that. But even if campuses have counselors, do these counselors ensure that students are seen, students are heard, and indeed students are helped? So that is the major question that we should ask ourselves going forward. Because for us to solve the matter of mental health, we should ensure that I as a student can come out, I can speak to a safe space, they can understand me, and actually we can walk together through the path of finding solutions. Institutions can ensure this by trying to come up with a system of peer-to-peer counselors, trying to train other students so that they can help other students before they reach to the trained or the counselor, to the professional counseling level. And everyone, as I had said, it's a collective responsibility, meaning that even as the institutions, as they take their responsibility, parents need to take their responsibilities by ensuring they are supportive, not to release their children at a very young age. Students, we are supposed to also be responsible for our mental health by ensuring we are not, engaging or involving or sitting in environments that tend to trigger us. Even the government is supposed to be responsible. And I think because of time, I will leave it at that. And I believe that can be adequate to carry us through this session.
Thank you so much, Valentine, for that very passionate presentation. You really give life to the numbers that we have seen. We have seen the 45%, the 29%, whatever numbers we have seen, but your description really brings life. It makes it vivid, the experiences that students on campus face. And you've asked very important questions that we are going to now bring to the panelists and then to the QA session. So let's transition right away to the panel questions, and I'll start with Prof. Lukoe. We have specific questions for you. So to Prof from the UZIMA data science findings, what stands out as the most urgent mental health risk factor among Kenyan university students, and why?
All right, so I would probably say that what we found were things that we can talk about that will be protective rather than risk factors. So basically, as we uncovered, frequency of engagement in religious activities. So my own take on this is that frequency of socialization. Being with other people, being part of a community seems to be something that is protective. And in this case, it happened to be that they are part of a religious community and they have activities they do together, and they sing and dance and do things that keep somebody active, and that was found to be helpful. Obviously, female gender has for a long time been a risk factor for many mental disorders for a variety of reasons, some known and some unknown. And this is composite, so it is difficult for you to generalize and say that across board, what reason makes females more likely to report having a mental disorder. Those are the main things that we found. Most of the other factors, the age range was pretty narrow, so it was not possible for us to extricate and say if there's a particular age group that is affected, because all of them were between 18 and somewhere around 23, 24. Where they came from, it was heterogeneous, and those were not considered to be risk factors. But then there was considerable comorbidity between the disorders, as I didn't show in this presentation, but as we write up our data, we will demonstrate that many of the disorders seemed to travel together. So you might find a significant comorbidity between social anxiety and major depressive disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder and substance use disorders, and so on and so forth. So those factors, if you see somebody engaging in some of the behaviors that constitute symptoms in one disorder, there's a high risk that they also have another disorder. So that's how I would summarize it.
Hadn't unmuted.
Yes.
Thank you, Prof. And while we're here, allow me to pick a question from the chat. Someone asked, someone made a very important point about how they expected to see anxiety and depression at the top, but instead we saw eating disorders, which was very interesting.
Absolutely.
So they asked what the potential explanation would be for that and what could be contributing to that high rate of eating disorders.
Absolutely. So when we went in, yes, we were not surprised by relatively high rates of anxiety disorders because these have been reported before. We expected a higher prevalence of depression because this has been reported before, but and also substance use because these have been reported in this particular age group. But we were also surprised to see the eating disorders being, the largest contributor to morbidity among these young people. I think it's a different pattern, and I think it's a genuinely different pattern that we are seeing compared to previous surveys that have been done in these same age groups. And it might say something, and I think Valentine spoke about Gen Z and all that. It might say something about the changing social habits and the changing value system in the younger population of the youth, because eating disorders to a large extent have been influenced by social perceptions and social norms. And in many places, they have shown that exposure to certain standards, for instance, in the media or in the fashion industry, are large drivers of eating disorders, especially among females. So this to me is a demographic shift because eating disorders were more commonly reported in North America and Europe compared to Africa and this part of the world. But now there is a homogenization of culture with the social media, with internet. And so we are seeing a rise in those kinds of disorders today.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Next question to you, Prof. Still. Where do you see the biggest gap between what the data is telling us and how universities are currently responding?
Yeah, I think surveying all our universities in this country, I would say the data is telling us that half of your students have at least one lifetime mental disorder, and up to a third of them have an active symptomatic mental illness going on with them. And one would think that with such a magnitude of a problem that you would have corresponding size of mental health services available to students in the universities, but we are not seeing enough of that. Granted that over the past few years, this has improved in many of the institutions, but it's still not enough. If you're thinking about 1/3 of your population being actively in some kind of distress, then you have to have services that help them. And this might even explain some of the issues that we see in the universities, including academic performance, but also the social behaviors that are going on. It's in the best interest of our institutions to ensure the students have access to functioning, high-quality mental health services.
Thank you so much, Prof. And again, I'll ask a question that's also in the chat and also in my mind. What policy changes need to be made and what interventions need to be put in place, seeing that there's such a high burden of mental health challenges among our students? What can be done?
Yeah, I think the regulators who set standards must include a standard on access to mental health services to begin with. And secondly, based on the survey that we are doing, I think it is beneficial to institutions to do an initial assessment at the beginning of their students' mental health as they come in, so that they can identify those who are at risk in the course of their studies and provide supports for them in order for them to flourish. And then they should have a system of follow-up for students who have mental health problems within campus, and there should be options because the students indicated that they had a bad experience with some of the campus mental health services, to also have the opportunity to get access outside campus where they don't feel stigmatized or they don't feel like the confidentiality will be broken. So I think the regulators have to include a standard on access to mental health services, as well as screening for mental disorders for all university students in order that they can be assisted. This is important because the earlier you catch many of these mental disorders, the more likely it is that you can provide help. And the earlier you provide help, the more likely this person is to thrive in later life.
Thank you so much, Prof, for telling us that we need to take a proactive approach and we cannot wait for the crisis to happen before we act. Yeah. So switch gears to Dr. Caroline Ayuya. From your experience, Daktari, working with students, how are these mental health challenges actually presenting in real life? And what are we missing if we only look at the data?
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me, Prof and Doc. I want to respond that from both a clinical practitioner, but as well as from someone academic, looking from what I've been able to observe. I think students don't present, they rarely walk into an office and tell you in a diagnostic language, I'm clinically distressed, or I am clinically depressed. But however, we look at it from the certain behavior that is portrayed by students. For example, they are missing their classes, or they are submitting their work very late, or the student is probably asking for extension. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't submit this work. Can I submit it next week? That kind of thing. And beneath it, the student is really exhausted. And for that, the performance is draining and going down. It doesn't always mean that every student who is having a mental challenge at any point, the grades go down or performance go down. There's a possibility that actually they can still perform very well in a certain environment, but there are certain things now behind this. And of course, we are saying that this is now where this data comes in closely, because it may not necessarily tell us what is behind this particular. We are seeing the eating disorders, we are seeing the anxiety, we are seeing so many disorders have been presented. But the question is literally what is behind this, because we can only see at the surface. So I think in real life, we are saying that there are very many things we see in mental health challenges. And first, maybe talk about 4 things. One is academically, the declining grades, declining presence in class, probably motivation, procrastinations of students, etc. Second is emotionally. Another behavior that is very, for me as a clinician, as opposed to every other faculty member who has not gone through this, and that is from now a clinician in an academic practice, is the emotional behavior. Sometimes just unnecessarily irritable, and I'm using the word unnecessary because that's what people think and perceive. Why is she just irritable? But that's exactly how they're presenting themselves. Sometimes very tearful, sometimes losing hope, and we have had cases where we have admitted a student in our own university, and they came as first year, went through a very good orientation program from Monday to Friday. The last day, they had been asked to change a program by their parents. The child could not. The next thing, everybody went away, had their dinner. We usually have a dinner gala for our new students, but that student didn't show up. And because you also knew nobody knows who you are and everybody knows who you are, believe you me not, the student was so active the whole week. The next time we didn't find the student in the dormitory anymore. They had the first 5 days in a university. That is some of the things that you're talking about, the first years coming, of course, physically and behaviorally. There's this fatigue, they're sleeping, disruption sometimes, etc. So what we are saying is that what we are looking at, these are signals that are very key for us to be able to see. But what are we missing if we only look at this data? We are missing the story behind the score. Why are we having very high eating disorders? The data has told us that is what it is. It has given us the levels of depression, the levels of eating, but we are missing the story behind this. And therefore, that is telling us how many students are distressed, are having these eating disorders, are depressed, etc. But then how this distress are affecting, and the cause of them for some is what the data is missing. And that's what Prof is saying. there is more than just now the data. The data is giving us the overall picture and the global picture of what every university or what represents. This university represents the total global picture of Kenyan universities. The question is, what is the story behind this particular presentation of these challenges? So now, secondly, see, students can actually record. We have 45% of students, or 50 or 30 presenting with certain similar disorders that Prof has actually been able to. But then we are asking, each of them is struggling differently, and each of them has a different cause, and each of them has a different burden to understand it. So what we are thinking is we are also missing what is invisible, what we can say, what is in the system that is actually perpetrating or causing these particular conditions. So for me, I think here is that we are now moving from a clinical, we need to move to our clinical lens needs to be wider. Now that Desta and Yumoi and everybody, and now we are telling the story of what is happening in the universities, how can we now start recognizing this suffering, this impairment, and now bring in the support system? Of course, we know. Why do students not seek support, as you asked, I think? It's because services exist. But somebody has just said here, and I think, Valentine, you've really mentioned this very clearly, and the respondents have actually said confidentiality matters. What are they? Is that office safe for me to go and tell my story? Stigma is already there, is one of them. The anxiety, the low mental health, illiteracy. As I join, as I said, we did orientation. The question is, there was a session for counseling. And I remember that is actually the week we were collecting data in our university. That's the week we were collecting. That's the week we lost students who had just lost a life, So the question is, was that orientation sufficient? But did it give us time to be able to address this? So basically, the low mental health literacy is one of our biggest challenges in universities, which we need. Of course, the mistrust of services, and who will be told? Will my parent be told? Will my teacher be told? Would my friends know? Etc. So basically, unlike a physical condition that is sometimes known and people acknowledge and support, mental health is perceived differently. So, and then the preference for informal support, like in our university, we have chaplaincy. Some students think maybe seeking support system from other alternative support, like the chaplaincy or religious leaders or friends or anything else. So I think for me, Professor Jaguga, is that universities just we shouldn't just measure these conditions merely by just looking at the counseling services existing. We should ask whether the students trust these counseling services, whether they understand them, whether they can access them, whether these fears can actually be degraded, etc. And I think if we do that and recognize and appreciate this, probably we shall have a little bit of a change around the system in mental health areas in our universities. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. for a detailed explanation. What I hear you saying is that beyond the quantitative data and the numbers, we need this other information that tells us how do these mental health struggles look like? Where do they come from? What impact do they have on the students? And we need those experiences. We need that rich data. The numbers are not adequate. We need to look at what the barriers are to seeking care. That is also data, only it's a different kind of data than the numbers, and that needs to be collected as well for the goal of improving care for our students. So thank you so much. And I'd like to transition to Valentine. So, Kwega, from a student perspective, what are the biggest pressures affecting mental health today? And which ones do institutions tend to underestimate? I think these are the biggest student pressures on campus. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I hope I am audible enough.
Yes. Okay, you are breaking.
Answer your question now. Okay, let
You're
me take
breaking.
it again. What about now?
Yes, now it's fine.
Okay, okay. So thank you. I'll proceed to answer the question in two parts because I believe the question, my understanding of the question is that it has two parts. Number one, the biggest pressures affecting mental health and which ones do institutions tend to underestimate. On the first part of the question, I'll be so brief. The biggest pressures that I can say are affecting campus students mentally. Number one is academic pressure. That is the workload. You have to deal with the deadlines, and there's a goal setting, and sometimes you have to also think about the future. And this can cause a lot of pressure on the student. Number two is financial instability. And as a pressure and as something major affecting campus students, it can cause to students starting to look for work. And when you are looking for work, you're forced to balance between work and study. And we know, as even as parents, as lecturers, we know that when students are at campus, you have no other business other than focusing on your studies and graduating. And so another pressure is that financial instability, and another thing is relationships and family issues. Before I move on to my second, if you kindly just give me a moment, I connect my laptop to the charger.
All right. So as you connect, there was a question here that I will share with Dr. Ayuya. How can we prevent stressors from becoming clinical mental disorders?
Yes, thank you so much. I think stressors, obviously, in one way or the other, all of us at one time, we find ourselves stressed and different causes of these stressors on our side. I think one of the things we really encourage, and which is preventive to make it. First of all, we know seeking help is very important, and we are talking about not help from anybody. There are many quotes. There are many people give you. Not TikTok will give you that. Not anything else. You need to seek help. Human help support you is very important. However, most important is also sharing people who can keep you information, who are very close to you, your confidence about what you're going through, that this is happening so that they can. That is usually the fastest move that people make. But of course, we as clinicians, we always say every university has a counseling center in one way or the other. And of course, just that kind of seeking help is very key. Probably, Professor Lukwe, we need to find where maybe we need a USSD or a call center in Kenya that is going to offer support or referral system and free of charge for young people or all of everybody in the country if possible anyway, so that we can have, or just for university students. I think sometimes it's just that they don't know where to seek help and to avoid this. So let's talk to people who are very confident, confidence, and most important is if there is a nearest help you can seek, including your counseling, counseling the university, or even the chaplaincy or the religious leaders who can support. At that time is more of reducing, but eventually we want you to seek professional support because we need to measure what is behind that story, because the story behind is for us the most important reason we want to get to know why you're stressed.
Thank you so much, Daktari. A question for Professor Lukwe that's showing up on the chat. People are asking whether, admitting very young students, 17 years and around that age to campus, they're not socially developed, cognitively as well, challenges with decision making. Are they ready for campus? Is that contributing to mental health issues among campus students? What's your take, Prof?
So as I said earlier, more than 75% of all mental disorders will show up by the age of 25. And more than half of them will show up between the ages of 14 and 19. So these are the times when people are going to college, people are, they're entering early adulthood and so on. It's just a vulnerable period for these conditions to show up. So it's not necessarily the fact that somebody has gone to university young that they are developing a mental illness. The mental illness, there are people who are vulnerable to certain mental illnesses and exposed to a certain environment or a certain social setting, those disorders will show up. So it just so happens that they are in the university. And secondly, we have a huge number, a bigger number of university students today than we had 10 or 20 years ago. And so you're going to see, even just number-wise, a lot more young people with mental illnesses in our universities than there were 10, 20 years ago. So I wouldn't blame going to university early as a factor in bringing out these mental disorders. I would say it is just a setting where they find themselves in. The contribution might be that, in addition to all the things that are changing in their lives, they also have to address academic stressors and so on. But that would only be considered as a trigger rather than a cause for the mental illness.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Prof. Valentine, are you good now?
Yes, yes.
All right. Please go ahead.
Okay. Let me just take the question from the top. I'm going to answer the question in 2 bits. And the first bit, I will respond by answering the biggest pressures that affect mental health at campus level. And the second bit, I'm going to answer it as which ones do institutions tend to underestimate. So some of the biggest mental health factors that really affect campus students are academic pressure, as I had earlier mentioned. You have to deal with the workload, you have to deal with deadlines, setting goals, and you have to also be future oriented. This can lead to a lot of mental health issues. The second thing is financial instability, where you find a student, what we call the parent released the child at an early age. You can make a phone call at home, you find they are not responsive, and it forces you to now look for a job while you're working. This will force a lot of campus students to now balance between work and studies, and it can contribute to a lot of mental health challenges. Thirdly, another co-contributor or another major contributor to mental health for campus students is relationship. As we are growing at the age of family relationships, that a lot of things are going on now at the family level, which can be really, really challenging and hard to navigate for students. And now, lastly, or rather, I will just combine it with relationship issues as I had explained, and those are now the family issues. Maybe your parents are separated, or maybe the family is not just stable to support you, or the things revolving around that. So these are some of the major stressors of the major contributors of mental health at campus. And now to the second part of the question, where Dr. Florence, you had asked, which ones do institutions tend to underestimate? Okay, so according to me, institutions tend to underestimate the challenge of academic stress and relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. According to me, institutions tend to underestimate the challenge of academic stress and relationships. And starting off with academic stress, this is because the institutions will expect performance from students, because they are guided that if the previous generations, I remember during my narrative, I had explained that we are in a season where we are different generations. We have the older generation, we have the Gen Zs, we have the younger generation, and all those types of generations. So many institutions can be guided that if the previous generations did it so well, then we, the younger generation, or rather we students who are at campus at the moment, are expected to do the same. And this can force, or rather can push students to go through or rather navigate campus life without seeking that emotional support. And this sometimes leads to a lot of burnout. You realize that a student who was active, just as Dr. Caroline had given an example, starts to isolate. And this is because they did not find a lot of support at the campus level, because not all the campuses in Kenya offer that emotional support to students. And the second thing that I think institutions tend to underestimate is the relationship issues. As I had earlier said, even if I was a professor right now or a lecturer, I would be telling myself, you as a student, your major goal here at campus is just to focus on your studies. But now institutions have the expectations that students should be now focusing on their studies, that they tend to override the issues that a student is now growing. They tend to, get into relationships, the family issues, and this can lead to a lot of pressure and fatigue, and students can result into loneliness and have a lot of emotional burnout. Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'll take that as your parting shots, Valentine. I welcome Dr. Caroline to give her parting shots as we move towards the end of the webinar.
Thank you so much. I would like to encourage all of us. It's not just students, it is even us faculty who are teaching you that mental health, just like physical health, anyone, I always say, born of a woman, as long as you're born of a woman, you're prone to problems. And therefore you're prone to any challenges in this world, and any of them can cause us into situations. Always just know that you're not alone, and therefore that is why you need to seek help, because there is always help. Seek help, do not be quiet. Always seek help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof. Luque, I'd like to invite you to make a comment on the role of AI in supporting student mental wellness, as well as give your parting shots.
Thank you very much. I think technology, not just AI, but technology as a whole, including the internet and even telephone consultations and so on, has a role to play in, firstly, promotion of mental health. So people have access to mental health literacy, and they have access to assets that can help them address questions that they might have about mental health, their own and that of their friends. Secondly, they have a role in prevention of mental illness by promoting certain behaviors and also supporting early identification of some of the signs that might lead to mental illness, and providing support and assistance in dealing with them. Thirdly, they can have a role in primary mental health care. So there are apps that can help with suicide prevention. So, initially by providing you with some supportive intervention, but then also connecting you to care. So that's a role that can be played. And we've seen, I had a case recently where somebody was actually directed to a health facility when they went to a large language model app and asked for advice on how to write a suicide note. And this app walked them through the process, indicated that people who feel like that usually have depression or another mental illness, and that there is help available. And they gave them links to a hospital where this person called, and they were actually assisted. So those roles are there, and it can be positive. But obviously, there is always a downside. So there has to be a human in the loop to ensure that these AI tools and apps and so on are actually doing the right thing, and that they're not harming the users on the other side. So my parting shot is that there is absolutely no health without mental health, and mental illness mental illnesses are the chronic illnesses of young people. So while older people have hypertension, diabetes, and so on, for the young people, the main chronic illnesses are mental illnesses. And so we have to invest in our academic institutions in services that cater for the mental health of our youth, because this is their biggest chronic illness problem at that stage in their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our participants, the organizers, and of course to our panelists for an excellent all-round discussion. And have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.